The League One weekend has come to a close with only 3 fixtures being played, but it was 3 interesting ones. Wrexham have gone to the top of the table. Barnsley have picked up another victory, and Rotherham faced up against Charlton in what was another Steve Evans disaster class. Now, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification down below to stay tuned for all of my latest Derby County and EFL Championship and League One content which is heading your way. Just a few days ago we did a video all about the best teams in the Championship where we reviewed the league table, top goal scorers, top assisters, and we're going to go through all of that with League One today. So if that's something you're interested in seeing and seeing the matchday previews and reviews, make sure that subscribe button is hit. Now, at Oakwell, it was very interesting for Barnsley, whose new signing, Davis Kaler-Dunn, scored after just 11 minutes. They were chasing him for a long time during the summer and finally got that one over the line. Bristol Rovers picked up a goal just before half-time with Rule Satoru, and Adam Phillips rounded out the scoring for the game, completing a 2-1 victory for Barnsley. Now, this is very interesting in round 5 of League One. Barnsley seem to have picked up some form. I believe they're not far outside the playoffs anyway. They might even be in the playoffs now as a result of all the other fixtures being called off. But it was a very, very interesting performance for these two sides. And if we do just take a scroll down and look at the basic numbers behind the performance, 57% possession to 43. Now, Bristol Rovers created the better chances at 1.67 XG in comparison to Barnsley's 1.20. But Barnsley had double the shots and 1 big chance, whereas obviously Bristol Rovers had only 8 shots and 2 big chances. Now, if we do go ahead and look at the lineups for the two sides, you can see that for Barnsley, if we just zoom out a little bit, so as you can see for Barnsley, their new signing, Kayla Davis-Dung played, their new goalkeeper played. I think he's played a couple of games for them now, and they sort of seem to have found a rhythm. Obviously you've got Josh Earl in there, you've got Donovan Pines back in as well, Phillips and Connell in that midfield, Cosgrove up front. I think this Barnsley side is really, really good. You obviously think about the experience that they've got in the squad as well with the signing of Conor Horahan, who was obviously part of that promotion push for Derby County. And obviously for Derby, that didn't start until much later on in the season, around the end of October, before Derby sort of hit their form. So it's one of those where if Barnsley can sort of hit their stride, they're still well within the conversation for promotion. You look at the Bristol Rovers side, they do have some really good players, but it just didn't necessarily turn up to the level they have done in recent games. If we do look at the players who came off the bench, you obviously see the likes of Corey O'Keefe, Josh Benson, Lofthouse, Aidan Marsh coming on for Darryl Clark, and then you've got Scott Sinclair, Shaqiri Ford, you've got Kofi Shaw, all coming on for Bristol Rovers. It's a very interesting game when you think about the complexity of it and the importance of Barnsley to pick up some results. Now, it's not that they started the season badly, but they came into the season off a bad run of form. They lost on the opening day. They've picked up, I think, another bad result in there as well. And it sort of wasn't particularly looking good for Barnsley. But coming to this point of the season, we've hit Game 5, the first international break. They've done really, really well to pick up 3 points versus Bristol Rovers. Towards the end of the video, we'll look at the league table and see where this leaves everybody. But Barnsley take a 2-1 win at home versus Bristol Rovers. Now, another game in which Steve Evans has found every reason to complain in his post-match press. Now, Rotherham took the lead after 58 minutes with, I think it's Liam Kelly, I want to say his name is. I could be wrong on that, so correct me down in the comments. And then Charlton Athletic equalised in the 72nd with Anike. Now, if we do look at the statistics of this game, it's a very different game to what I was expecting, if I'm completely honest. I thought Nathan Jones and Charlton would give up possession, let Rotherham have the ball, but it seemed as if it was pretty 50-50. Now, Charlton created the better chances at 0.76 XG in comparison to Rotherham's 0.4. Charlton also had less shots, 9 shots to 12 in Rotherham's favour, but Charlton created the better of the chances. Now, when looking through Charlton over recent weeks, I think we've found that a lot of the time they give up possession, they concede a lot of, not necessarily opportunities, but they concede a lot of ball possession in order to hit teams on the counter or in order to be able to let teams pull themselves out of position. Now, that didn't happen in this one, and they actually had the ball more often than Rotherham United, but when you think about Rotherham and Steve Evans and what he wants to do as well, it's a very similar game where he likes to give up possession, hit teams on the counter, play that percentage style football. And in this game, neither team got the better of each other. Now, post-match, Steve Evans was complaining about the official. Well, he was complaining about decisions that weren't given, and he always says, "But it's not the officials' fault," and it's things like that. And I know Steve Evans. I know a lot of people like Steve Evans, but I know he rubs a lot of people up the wrong way. And I think there's a lot that he could do to sort of change his perception in the world, especially in the world of football. And obviously, he's been a successful manager in his time. But if we look at the two sides, there is no reason why this Rotherham side shouldn't have been able to pick up the victory. There's no reason why this Rotherham side shouldn't have had a better start to the season. You look at the likes of Clark Harris, you look at Malik Wilkes, you look at Nombi, you look at Cameron Humphreys. They have some really, really good players, and that's not even including some of the players that are missing out of the squad. Well, that are injured and things like that. You look at this Charlton side, and it's not a bad side at all either. You've got the likes of Greg Doherty, you've got Connor Coventry, Ghassan Ahadmi, Matty Gooden. I think it's Luke Berry in midfield. They've got some really, really good players as well. Now, if you look at the benches for the two sides, Steve Evans has got the likes of Alex McDonald, Sean McWilliams, Jordan Hugill to choose from. And then Nathan Jones has Tyrese Campbell, Chuck Zanike, Alan Campbell, some really, really good players. And if you look at the players that weren't bought on, you've got Tanai Watson, you've got Romani Edwardson Green. Then you look at, obviously, the likes of Cohen Bramwell and Joseph Hungbo, who, are all players who can have an impact for these teams. And you look at Thierry Small playing left wing back for Charlton, a really, really good player in my opinion, has been under tons of interest over recent weeks, and well, throughout pretty much the last 6 months he's been of interest to other clubs, especially the likes of Derby County. I think Tottenham were interested at one point. You've got some other championship clubs in there as well, but he's stayed true to Charlton Athletic. He's signed a 1-year extension, I believe, which will be interesting to see how that goes for him over the course of the next 12 months. But I think it's really important looking at this game, because I think both of these sides will be up there towards the end. I think Rotherham are sort of going to have to go on a Derby-style run if they want to win promotion this year. Obviously, it is still only early. There's 41 games left to play, which is a lot of football. So there's no reason for Rotherham fans to get upset or anything like that. But there's still a chance for them. There's still a chance for every team in this division, really. And we saw that with Derby County last year. Now, Wrexham have topped the league table after round 5 of League One, and it's very interesting for me because I think there could be an opportunity here where we see back-to-back promotions. And obviously you've got the likes of Stockport, who have been promoted as well, that are doing really well. Crawley had started okay, but I think they lost their last game, if I remember rightly. But Wrexham have been really, really good. They've been arguably probably the best team out of possession in League One this season. And I think the manager there has really took a page out of Paul Warne's book, because that's what Derby County were really good at last season. Don't concede many goals, create really good opportunities. You don't need a lot of the ball. And it's one of them for me where you look at the people that are scoring. You've got Palmer, you've got Lee, you've got Jack Marriott, what was a championship playoff semi-finalist scorer just a few years ago for Derby County. And they've got some really good players at Wrexham. And I know I spoke in, I think it was the preview, about Wrexham's budgets, and I just want to sort of clear up what I was saying. I wasn't talking about outright transfer fees. I was never talking about that, because obviously if we're going to talk transfer fees, I don't actually think they've spent anything this window. But what I'm talking about is the likes of the wages that they can offer to players. And I know some people say, well, maybe it's not the same as a lot of teams, but I think they do have a budget that's bigger than a lot of League One teams, and I think they've had that sort of budget for the last few years. It's very interesting watching this Wrexham side be built, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a big budget. They've earned it with the reputation that they've built and the owners that they've brought in. So it's one of those for me where they completely deserve to be in the position they're in, and it will be interesting to see where Wrexham end up this season. Obviously, right now they're sitting top of the league, which we'll get into in a minute, but it's a really, really good performance yet again by Wrexham. If we look at the performance here, it's a little bit different to the ones that we've seen recently. a bit more of the ball this time, 56% possession, 1.56 xG off 15 shots, 3 big chances, in comparison to Shrewsbury Town's 44% possession, 0.33 xG and 9 shots. Now, I just want to clear up that I think Wrexham came into this game expecting to win, and that's not a slight on Shrewsbury Town. I think Shrewsbury Town are an okay team in this division. The problem is they're always going to be sort of that bottom end of the mid-table. I know they had a couple of good seasons recently, but I do think they're going to be sort of that bottom end of the mid-table, because I'm pretty sure, if I remember rightly, they've had to rejig a lot with finances and things like that because they went for it, and that's okay. It's good that they went for it, and now they're recouping, restarting, and that's the right thing to do. Now, obviously, you look at the Wrexham side, you look at the likes of McLean, you look at Rathbone, you look at Dobson, you look at Marriott, Palmer. You've also got the likes of Paul Mullen on the bench, Steve Fletcher. Like, they've got some really, really good players. Dan Scarr, who was part of Plymouth's promotion winning team. If you look on the bench for Shrewsbury, you've got Taylor Perry, who's a young player. You've got Tommy O'Reilly, Josh Feeney. And it's one of those for me where they're just working on different scales, and that is okay. It happens in every division, and it is going to be really interesting to see how Shrewsbury Town compete for the rest of the season. I think Wrexham are doing really well, obviously at the top of the table, and it's one of those for me where I certainly think that both of these sides, I think, will end up being safe. I think Wrexham certainly are probably going to be pushing for the playoffs. I think I probably have a little bit underestimated especially Wrexham and Stockport, because obviously the start to the season they've had has been incredible. But it's just one of those things where I think they'll all find a rhythm, and it's just about how long can you keep the rhythm going for. Now, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell to stay tuned for all of my latest Derby County and EFL, Championship and League One content heading your way. Obviously, the League One match preview will be out on Wednesday with the Championship preview, which might come out on Tuesday. We'll just have to see how things go. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments of this game week. Let me know your thoughts on the league table. We're going to get into that right now. Now, we're looking at the top end of the table. As you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the top 12 teams. Now, obviously, you've got Wrexham at the top of that on 13 points. They've had a really, really good start to the season. 4 wins, 1 draw, scoring 11, conceding just 2. Really, really good performances by them. But obviously, next up, they face Birmingham City, who are going to want to shut them down, really. Want to take the first loss for Wrexham of the season. Is that something Birmingham can do? They've obviously had a good start of their own. You look at Stockport, they've done really, really well as well. 4 games played, 3 wins, 1 draw, 8 goals scored, 1 goal conceded. It's been a really, really good start for them. They come up against Crawley Town next in what I think will be a really, really important fixture for Stockport. Another win for them keeps them on the right track. You obviously look at Barnsley, who after their game this weekend have found themselves in 3rd position on 10 points. They face up against Stevenage next, which is going to be a really, really interesting one. 5 games played for them, 3 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss. You look at Birmingham City, their only points they've dropped was on the opening day versus Reading, if I remember rightly. And they've been really, really good since then, obviously spending the money they've spent. Obviously, as mentioned previously, they face up against Wrexham. Will Stanisfield get his first League One minutes of the campaign? It's going to be really interesting to see how he gets on. You obviously look then next at Charlton and what Nathan Jones has done there. Obviously, this time last season, they were struggling a little bit, but it's 3 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss with 5 goals scored, 3 conceded. They don't score many, but they don't concede many either. 10 points for them. They face up against Shrewsbury Town next. You've then got, sitting in 6th place, Lincoln City, 3 wins and a loss, 9 goals scored, 5 conceded, 9 points for the total. They face up against Peterborough next, and I think both of these two sides will probably expect to be in and around the playoffs come the end of the season. I think Lincoln City have started off really well. Skubala really keeping up with their form from last season. Obviously, I think they've only lost 1 game, maybe 2 games since January, maybe 3, something around that echelon anyway, and they've been really, really good. Now, Huddersfield, exactly the same as Lincoln City, 3 wins and 1 loss, 6 goals scored, 3 conceded. It's going to be interesting to see how they face up against Bolton Wanderers, who haven't quite had the start to the season that they anticipated. You've got Reading now sitting in 8th place, 4 games played, 2 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss. They obviously picked up that draw versus Birmingham City, which I think will be a massive point come the end of the season. 5 goals scored, 4 conceded. They face up against Leyton Orient, who have had a really, really tricky start to the season. It's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. Bristol Rovers, 5 games, 2 wins, 1 draw and 2 losses. 4 goals scored and conceded. 7 points picked up for them. They face Wigan next, which is going to be a really interesting one to take a look into. Exeter, 4 games played, 2 wins, 2 losses, 5 goals scored, 4 conceded, 6 points, and they face up against Blackpool, who have recently appointed Steve Bruce as their new manager. It's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. Obviously, I think his previous role was at Newcastle just a few years ago. You then go on to Peterborough, who haven't quite had the start that they probably would have wanted. They face up against Lincoln next. They're currently sitting on 6 points with 2 wins and 2 losses to their name, 6 goals scored and conceded. We then go on to Crawley Town, who had a really, really good start there in 12th place, and they won their first 2 games, but they've lost their previous 2. They face up against Stockport next. That's going to be a really, really interesting one. 2 of the promoted sides going head to head. You then look at the likes of Northampton, Mansfield and Rotherham, who are all sitting on 5 points. Now, Northampton and Mansfield have played 4 games, 1 win, 2 draws and 1 loss for them both, respectively. Northampton face up against Wycombe Wanderers next. That's going to be a really interesting one. Mansfield face up against Cambridge. Rotherham have played 5 games, only picking up 5 points. It's a really, really disappointing one for them. They face up against Burton Albion this weekend. It's going to be a really, really interesting fixture, that. Burton Albion have found a way to stop conceding goals, but they've not yet found a way to score. You then look at Wycombe Wanderers there with 4 points, 8 goals scored, 8 goals conceded. They started the season off quite poorly with 2 losses in a row, but since then they've picked up 4 points in 2 games. They face up against Northampton. That's going to be an interesting one. Stevenage, as we know, face up against Barnsley this upcoming weekend. They've picked up 4 points, 1 win, a loss, a draw, and then another loss. Bolton, they face Huddersfield in what's going to be a really, really difficult fixture for them. Huddersfield have been doing really well this season. Obviously not quite where they want to be, but I'm sure they'll find a rhythm. It's going to be interesting to see what Bolton can do. Obviously, I think Ian Evatt is going to find himself under a lot of pressure if he doesn't start picking up some results, obviously sitting down there in 18th place. But as we've spoke about a few times previously, not just in this video, but also in my previous videos, it took until around October for Derby County to hit their rhythm, and I think they were sitting about 12th. They were 14 points off the top of the table at the point when they hit their form, and obviously they ended up finishing second. I think it was just 5 points off Pompey in the end. And then you've obviously got Burton Albion, who have brought in about 24 players this summer, which has been a really good window for them in terms of translating the takeover into changing around the philosophy of the squad. They've only picked up 3 draws in a row, obviously lost on the opening day. They face up against Rotherham. It could be a chance for Burton to pick up their first win of the season. Well, I say first win of the season, I mean first win of the league campaign. I think Burton Albion will certainly have the opportunity to do that. Wigan, they obviously find themselves sitting on 3 points as well, but they've lost 3 and won 1. They face up against Bristol Rovers next. That'll be a really interesting one. You've then got Shrewsbury also sitting on 3 points, but they've played 1 extra game. They obviously won previously, but not this weekend where they picked up a loss. They face up against Charlton next, which I think is going to be a really, really interesting game. We've obviously already mentioned Blackpool, who have recently appointed Steve Bruce. Obviously, Richard Keogh has taken charge, I think, of the last 3 or 4 games, not in the league, in all competitions, and I think he's done a fairly decent job. It's now going to be interesting to see how Steve Bruce translates his coaching ability onto the field. You obviously then look at Cambridge sitting on 1 point. They face up against Mansfield. They face up against Mansfield next, which is going to be really interesting to look into. Leyton Orient, as I mentioned, have had a really, really poor start to the season. 4 losses in a row, only 2 goals scored, conceding 8. They face up against Reading next. Richie Wellens will be hoping that he can get himself off the mark. Now, if we do look at the top-rated players, You've got Ravazzioli from Wycombe Wanderers, Lee Evans, and then Kyle Wootton. Your top goal scorers are Adam Phillips, Alfie May with 4, and then you've got Billy Bowden from Burton Albion with 3, and then your top assisters are Lee Evans and Abraham Odo from Peterborough and Blackpool, and then you've got Sean Rohan from Lincoln City. Now, obviously, it's been a really interesting start to the campaign. We'll just click through the team of the weeks for you to look at on this right-hand side. Some really interesting things to see. I think as the season goes on, this is going to turn into more of a Birmingham team of the week, because I do think they're going to hit a really good stride. But let me know what you think down in the comments. We've addressed League One and the results. We've looked into the league table. Make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell, and I'll catch you in my next video. Make sure to go and find me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and football weekend.